Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is Ron's Bank Shop Breakdown. We're going to go over 5 college basketball games for Wednesday, December 6, 2023. Now, if you like what you see, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to put your college basketball picks in the comments section below. And if you're looking for my best bets, including my $19 Bank Shop best bet, as well as my all-access season pass at College Hoops, you can find those at the Premium Picks tab at pickdawgz.com. Alrighty, let's get into it. Here are the games for Wednesday in college basketball. First up, it's Toledo and Oakland. This one's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN+. Toledo's on a 4-game losing streak, and now with the losing record on the year at 3-4. But I don't really put too much into that. They played a really tough schedule thus far, and that schedule is going to really help them prepare for these types of games, and also in MAC play, one of the tougher mid-major conferences in college basketball. Toledo's 4-game losing streak, all against teams in the top 100 in KenPom: New Mexico, UC Irvine, Indiana State, and George Mason. 3 of those games were at a neutral site, and one of those was a home game, the last one against George Mason. A lot of those teams really strong offenses, and Toledo's defense, not necessarily the strongest, 250th in adjusted defensive efficiency, but I think going forward, this defense is going to improve. When you look at the shot quality data, it's actually not too shabby, and they're forcing a lot of turnovers, 18th in the country in turnover percentage defensively. Their offense is already where it needs to be. It's 58th in the country in adjusted offensive efficiency, a really good shooting team, especially from the perimeter. Oakland on the other side finally lost the game against IPFW, Purdue Fort Wayne. It was on a 4-game win streak going into that game, and that includes a upset win over Xavier, 78-76, but lost to PFW by a 98-77 final score. I don't know if I trust this Oakland defense either, honestly. I think Toledo's defense is undervalued. I think Oakland's could be overvalued, overrated right now. The offense is fine. They're shooting the ball well, but I think Toledo, just as a team in general, is undervalued because of its recent 4-game losing streak. I think this is a good buy low spot for the Rockets. I think they're the better team in this matchup, so give me Toledo in this one on the money line. Next up, we see Jacksonville and UCF. This one's also going to be 7 p.m. Eastern. It's also going to be on ESPN+. Now, UCF getting ready for its 3rd straight game against an ASUN team, an Atlantic Sun opponent, as it played Stetson back on November 26th. Lost that game outright in an upset, 85-82, but it bounced back in a nice win against Lipscomb by 15 points on December 2nd. That's a pretty solid Lipscomb team. I think one of the better teams in the conference going into conference play. And then now they play Jacksonville, who I think is one of the weaker teams in the ASUN, honestly. Even though they have a nice 6-2 record on paper, they played a really weak schedule. And they're on a 4-game win streak, but you got to look at the opponents that they played along the way. Robert Morris, Fairleigh Dickinson, Campbell, and Georgia Southern, teams right around or well beyond the 300 mark in KenPom ratings this season. When we've seen Jacksonville step up in competition, there are 2 true road games against solid teams in Xavier and Pittsburgh. Blowout losses in both of those games. They lost 79-56 to Xavier, lost 107-56 against Pittsburgh. And I don't know if it's going to get that ugly, but I do think UCF wins this game and covers the number. I think UCF, one of the better defenses in college basketball this year, 33rd in the country in just the defensive efficiency. Really good rebounding team. They force a lot of turnovers, which is important. Against Jacksonville, this team does not take care of the basketball, turning the ball over 20% of the time on offense. So I do think UCF, while they're not a great half-court offense, they should be able to get a lot of fast break opportunities due to those forced turnovers, and that should be a lot of those buckets in this game. We could see UCF go on some big runs and quickly because they're forcing a lot of turnovers and scoring on the other end. I like UCF in this matchup. I like them to win big. Give me UCF laying the points. Next up, we see Texas and Marquette, one of the bigger games on the board for Wednesday's cards, a part of the Big East Big 12 battle. It's going to be an 8 p.m. Eastern start time on Fox Sports 1. Now, these teams are similar in the rankings. Texas is 12th, Marquette is 8th. Similar records. Texas has the better record at 6-1 compared to 6-2 for Marquette. But Marquette's a pretty sizable favorite in this game, and I think for good reason. I like the Golden Eagles in this ball game. Texas, while you look at their schedule, 6-1, they have that game against UConn. That was really their only tough matchup of the season. That was a neutral site game. It was a double-digit loss to UConn, 81-71. Outside of that game, they played one other neutral site game against Louisville, one of the weaker teams in the ACC. And then their other games were at home against pretty weak opponents. Incarnate Word, Delaware State, Rice, Texas State, Wyoming. Nothing really too challenging. This is going to be the first true road game of the season for Texas. I do think they're a bit overrated and overvalued right now. I think there's value fading the Longhorns, especially against Marquette, who I think is still one of the best teams in the country, despite there's 2 losses and 2 recent losses to Wisconsin and Purdue. Marquette is very much battle tested. They played Illinois on the road. They played UCLA and Kansas at neutral sites, beat them both. They, lost to Purdue, but only by 3 points at a neutral site. And like I said, the Wisconsin loss doesn't look great on paper, but that's a really undervalued, underrated Wisconsin team and a really tough place to play. So I think Marquette bounces back from a loss like that. I still, like I said, think this is a top 10 team, maybe top 5 in the country. Certainly on both ends of the court, I think they're the better team in this matchup. I think there's value on them in this spot. Give me Marquette big. I like them to win this game in blowout fashion. Next up, we see St. Bonaventure taking on Niagara. This one's going to be 7 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on ESPN+. I think Niagara's a live dog in this ball game. I like what St. Bonaventure's done this season. This is a solid program, balanced on both ends of the court, offensive and defensive. But Niagara, I do think, is underrated right now, and this is a regional rivalry. And a Niagara team in the MAAC that doesn't get to host too many A-10 opponents in regular season play in non-conference action. And Niagara's a pretty solid, offensive team where they're a pretty good shooting team. They're top 65 in three-point shooting. They take care of the basketball. On the defensive end, doesn't look great on paper in terms of the points per game given up, but Niagara's forcing a lot of tough shots, and they're a pretty good defensive rebounding team. They don't take too many fouls. St. Bonaventure, a really good offensive rebounding team, so it's important that Niagara takes care of the defensive glass, but they've been able to do so far this season. And, with St. Bonaventure's really slow pace of play, really both teams looking to slow things down, I just don't think there's going to be a ton of possessions. And I think there's value getting points with the home team in a game like this. I think it's going to be a really close game. I think Niagara has a chance to win the game outright. So give me those points with the Niagara Purple Eagles in this one. Next up, we see Nebraska at Minnesota. This one's going to be 9 p.m. Eastern. It's going to be on the Big Ten Network. Last year, Minnesota only won 2 games in conference play, and you can pretty much predict they're going to be underdogs in a lot of games this season in conference play. But this is one of those games where I like their chances, honestly. I think Minnesota's really improved so far this season. I know it's pretty early, but they've looked like a much better team this year than they did last year. They were competitive in that game against Ohio State, where they were able to cover the number on the road. 84-74 final score, but they were catching more than those 10 points. So they covered the number, and that was despite Ohio State shooting 53% from 3 and Minnesota shooting a measly 28.6% from 3. So they were still able to hold in that game despite getting, blitzed from the three-point line. And Nebraska coming off its first loss of the season to Creighton. It was an ugly game, 89-60. And a lot of people thought because Nebraska was home that they were going to be able to compete in that ball game. They didn't. They lost by just under 30 points. And now this is their first true road game of the season. They played a pretty weak schedule overall, despite other than that Creighton game. And while I like Nebraska overall, I think they're going to do some decent things in the conference. I don't love them on the road in this spot. I think Minnesota, this is one of their only winnable games in conference play this year, and they played pretty well so far, so I'll take Minnesota in this spot at home. Give me the Golden Gophers in this one. And that's it. Those are the games for Wednesday in college basketball. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. And don't forget to put your college basketball picks in the comments section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. As always, this is Romanelli. Good luck.